Hello from Columbus, Ohio. I'm Scott Foltz alongside Jason Dye. Those stories plus a rejuvenated Ohio State looks to continue their climb up the rankings. Two SEC teams hope to rebound from Week 5 losses and a Big Ten game with huge playoff implications.
And the Red River Showdown comes to the Cotton Bowl. All that coming up after this. You're watching Sports Talk on CFC, so stick around.
We open with a look back at a hard-fought contest between two Big 12 powerhouses as Oklahoma State pulled off a fourth-quarter rally to hand Baylor their first loss of the season. The Cowboys dominated in rushing, passing, and total yards, but they also threw 3 picks.
Yeah, they did. And, Baylor coming off of it, they weren't even supposed to be improved this year. And surprisingly, coming into this Oklahoma State game, just, the turnovers got the best of them, and Oklahoma State was ready to go. So I was glad to see the old mullet heads get it done.
Mm-hmm. Alabama doubled the score on Ole Miss and completely owned the first half, but the Rebels refused to stay down, scoring all their 21 points in the second half. Despite a valiant effort by the Rebels, the defending national champions were just too much to overcome.
It's just going to show there's probably only one team in the nation right now that's going to stop Alabama, and that's Georgia. Ole Miss, I thought, would bring a better fight throughout the whole game, but all Alabama, just too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they showed up in the second half, but you got to play all 60 minutes against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
A game we thought would be a close one turned into a one-sided thrashing as Georgia just embarrassed the Arkansas Razorbacks. The Bulldogs shut out the Hogs 37-0 and stopped Arkansas's momentum cold.
Georgia's defense, the best in the country, hands down. The offense, obviously clicking. Arkansas, no answers, just none. And like I said, I think the only team that's really going to challenge Alabama is Georgia.
Yeah. To be embarrassed like that. Now, that begs the question, is Georgia that good, or did Arkansas just completely fall apart, or a combination of both?
I think both. Yeah.
Because the Hogs were firing on all cylinders until this.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
It just blew up in their face.
They ran right into the wall of Georgia.
And when Georgia plays Alabama, that should be a good one.
Yeah.
And after 2 weeks of picking against them, you were this close to picking Notre Dame last week until you sensed a tremor in the force and reversed your pick. You were right to do so as the Cincinnati Bearcats continue their surge up the ladder, taking down the Irish for the first time this year.
Just starting with Notre Dame, the problems I don't think were 100% fixed. Yeah, I picked against them. I lost, like in the Wisconsin game, and I just thought, you know what? No, Luke Fickell, they get the Bearcats ready. These kids are going to get out here and get it done. And by golly, they went up to South Bend and won.
Yep.
So hats off to them. Right now, Cincinnati deserves to be in that playoff.
And they're in the top 5 right now.
Yep.
They're ranked 5th. Luke Fickell's Bearcats are for real this year.
Yeah.
A couple of big-time upsets last week as a pass interference call against Oregon on the last play of regulation gave the Stanford Cardinal one final play. A second touchdown pass took this one into overtime where Stanford scored first and then held off the Ducks, dropping Oregon to 4-1 in a Pac-12 nail-biter.
Yeah, and Stanford over the years has historically given Oregon fits, and it just didn't really look like Oregon was engaged in this game. And now can the Pac-12 even begin to think about the college football playoff? And there's a whole lot of football to be played left, but I think they still go on to win the Pac-12. But they better get these mistakes fixed because there's some hungry teams in the Pac-12 yet.
But you're picking the Ducks to win the conference.
Yeah.
Whether they go to the playoffs or not remains to be seen.
Yeah, and they go into Columbus and beat Ohio State. Yeah, I'm absolutely sticking with them.
The Gators dominated the stats in Lexington, but the Wildcats dominated the scoreboard as Kentucky toppled Florida to remain undefeated. Florida's had some impressive wins this year, but all of them over unranked teams. They lost to Alabama, which was expected, and then fell to an unranked Kentucky here, dropping the Gators from 10th to 20th and moving the Wildcats up to 16th. The Gators came within a field goal of beating the defending national champions, and then this. What happened here?
I think maybe just not really taking Kentucky seriously, and it shows a little bit more depth with Kentucky's win here in the SEC. Who knows what Florida's going to do now down the line, but probably probably will get a decent bowl game, whatnot. But just a surprising win by Kentucky. I mean, I would have never picked Kentucky to beat Florida.
Neither would I.
Yeah.
Not the way Florida was playing. And Kentucky, they themselves were undefeated, but they hadn't played any named teams.
Right.
Taking down Florida like this, like you say, Florida will get a decent bowl game. They'll show up in the postseason, but they're going to have a long, hard climb up the rankings. I don't see them making the playoffs, but I think they can stay ranked for the rest of the year, barring any more upsets like this.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a look ahead, the Buckeyes will host Maryland at the Horseshoe this weekend. Both teams are 4-1 for the year. The Terps falling to Iowa last week, while the Bucks are on a roll since falling to Oregon in week 2.
Yeah, I watched the Iowa-Maryland game, and I mean it was a disastrous ball game for Maryland. I mean, just multiple, I think 7 interceptions, just absolutely it was a just demoralizing backbreaker to a good start from Maryland.
Iowa's been a wrecking crew this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the keys for Maryland, they got to find a way this week to get to Stroud. That's not easy. That Ohio State offensive line has been playing lights out. And then going to the Ohio State side, defense will have another chance to improve. They showed great improvement last week.
The last couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And
they're starting to look like the Buckeye defense of old again.
Yeah, and I mean, they've still got some challenges ahead, but obviously another week to improve. The Maryland quarterback, he's just going to be able to, he's going to probably have a better game. He's not going to have a blowout game, and it'll be interesting to see what Ohio State brings for him. But Ohio State on the offensive side of the ball, you've got Stroud healthy. Henderson's going to be good to go. It's going to be a lot for Maryland to handle. I think it becomes a slaughterhouse real quick.
Do you think that the Buckeyes will stomp Maryland as bad as they did Rutgers last week, or are you giving the Terps just a little more credit?
I might give them just a little bit more credit, even though Rutgers, in my opinion, I think Rutgers was a solid team. Gave Michigan all they could handle. But
and I'm not saying Rutgers wasn't a solid team, but the Buckeyes just beat the red off of them last week.
Yeah, they were ready for anything and everything. So I like Ohio State 51, Maryland 23.
All right, pretty wide score margin there, but against those two teams, it seems respectable. Ole Miss will host Arkansas. Both teams coming off a disastrous Week 5. Both teams in desperate need of a win if they'll have any hope of a postseason. Somebody's woes will continue. The question is who?
And yeah, both teams beat up, banged up, demoralized. I mean, they were taken to the woodshed. I think Ole Miss in this game, though, they strike fast with an early lead. I think in Arkansas, I think you're going to see a heavy dose of the running game. I like Arkansas in this one, 31-27.
That's interesting. I would have picked Ole Miss just because they put up points against the defending national champions, whereas the Hogs were completely slaughtered by Georgia. But again, as you're so fond of saying, any given Saturday, anything can happen.
Yep.
Exactly. That's why we love this game. Texas will host Oklahoma in the Red River Showdown. The Horns coming off 3 straight wins, their only loss being to Arkansas, while the Sooners barely beat Kansas State last week, only winning by 6. You've been saying the same thing about Oklahoma as you were about Notre Dame, that their luck would eventually run out. Is this the weekend where the Sooners finally fall?
Absolutely. Oklahoma still has not proven to me that they've got everything clicking on all cylinders. They struggled with Kansas State. I mean, they've struggled with everybody, it just seems, and it doesn't seem like the ship is completely right. In order for Oklahoma to win, Spencer Rattler has got to have, like, the game of the year. This is Texas. You have to take this seriously. You have to get out there. This team has to be motivated. Texas, on the other hand, has quickly improved under Steve Sarkisian, and offense has just been explosive. I think they're going to give Oklahoma a ton of fits, and I think that Texas defense comes up with some really key stingy turnovers.
So who are you calling in the showdown?
I like Texas 35, Oklahoma 27.
Very close game, but then the Red River Showdown usually is.
Mm-hmm.
And our game of the week. This one should be one of the best games we'll see all year. Iowa will host Penn State in a game that will have major playoff implications and will tell the story of the entire Big Ten Conference. Iowa has completely dominated the Big Ten West, while Penn State is hanging with Michigan State, Michigan, and the Buckeyes in the East. These two teams are so evenly matched, you were having a hard time picking this game. You were down to tossing a coin, and then you didn't believe the coin.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say whoever wins this game has a much clearer path to the Big Ten championship and possibly the playoffs?
I would definitely think so. Just starting with Iowa, they've been winning games on heavy turnover margin. They're way up on turnovers. They just know how to get that ball. Secondary's been completely just nightmarish for people. Iowa on the offensive side, they're going to be looking to control the clock in this one. You don't want to give Sean Clifford and that Penn State offense time to move the ball. Clifford for Penn State, he's going to have to find more ways to get more targets into this game. You can't just keep throwing it to one guy and Jahan Dotson. I think it's going to be a game where Penn State is really just going to have to open it up. They're going to throw. You're going to have to throw everything at Iowa.
He's going to have to use all his receivers on this one.
Absolutely. And you got to get that game, and you got to get that running game going too. You just keep it a nice balanced attack. This is going to be the hardest hitting game of the year. This is
two stout Big Ten schools going at each other.
Yeah, and
we're going to see some collisions.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be just a phenomenal game for even if you didn't have a dog in this fight. I mean, it's just you got to watch it.
Yeah,
it's must see TV.
Absolutely. So the big question: who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I like you said, we struggled with this. I struggled with it. Flipping a coin wasn't working. It's just I couldn't justify it one way or the other. But the common sense thing is to take Iowa at home, 20-17,
within a field goal. I would say that's believable the way that both these teams have been playing this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great game. It really is. I can't wait.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, taking a look at the Power 5 conferences this week, what's your rundown on these 5?
Well, here we go. We're at the point now we need to start looking at who's the contenders. Starting with the SEC, there's 2. We know who they are.
Yep, Alabama, Georgia.
Alabama, Georgia. One of those teams is going to be in the playoff. Actually, I take that back. Both of those teams will be in the playoff because they're going to win out. They're going to eventually play each other. One's going to lose the other. They're still going to be there.
Yeah.
And there's just nobody else that's a real challenger to anybody else in the SEC. It's just they're running away with it right now. And then going on to the Big Ten, Iowa has got the West.
Absolutely. The Big Ten West is Iowa and the victims of Iowa at this point.
Yeah, they've been absolutely on fire. And then the question is, who wins this Iowa-Penn State game, are we potentially looking at a preview of the Big Ten title game?
Possibly.
If Penn State runs the board, they beat Ohio State, they beat Michigan, they keep on keeping on. They go in there, and we're looking at this game again down the road. Would be a pleasure to see. Michigan State, they've got to keep winning. Ohio State obviously controls its own destiny, but they have a big one in Penn State. It's the East is still up for grabs. Michigan, I think they've done really good too, but it's still too early to call who wins the Big Ten East. And then moving on to the Big 12. Well, here we are. Texas, Oklahoma, maybe Oklahoma State. I think clearly in the Big 12, I don't think you really have a playoff contender. I just don't. I think once Texas takes care of Oklahoma this week, and we hope that happens because I predicted that, but
and we like to be right on our own show.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that the Big 12 is going to fall off, and Texas could go right down the line and one of those games and lose. I just they're strong, but anybody can get beat on any given Saturday. So I don't really think the Big 12 has a contender going into the playoff situation. Same thing with the Pac-12, or it's Oregon. UCLA has been. We don't even know what UCLA is right now. They started off hot and they fell off. Cal, Oregon State, Washington State. It's just nobody there really to challenge Oregon. I don't think I really don't think the Pac-12 really has a dog in the fight either, going on down the road. And then finally, the ACC. There is no dog. Clemson's done. But, oh my gosh.
The only team in the ACC that's even ranked is Wake Forest, and they're ranked 19th.
Yeah, and
how long has it been since we haven't seen Clemson ranked?
Yeah, they beat Boston College and still fell out. That's how.
But at this point, what's beating Boston College mean?
Yeah, it means nothing. And the ACC has gotten weaker. I mean, Virginia Tech has been okay so. North Carolina has been okay so. But then they get beat by teams they're not supposed to get beat by. Duke goes on to win a couple games here and there, but then they turn around and lose. And I mean, it's a mess. Florida State just won their first game of the year, and so they ain't doing nothing. So it's just
Florida State's a disaster at this point.
Yeah,
I think.
And it sucks because you want to see these teams start to come back into some type of glory again, but it's very clear that a lot of these teams in these conferences are a long ways off from that.
Time now for this week's edition of Impact or No Impact. This week's question is of such importance it's the only question we're asking. How much of an impact will it be to have only a 4-team playoff this year with what we've seen so far going into week 6?
It's absolutely huge because the playoffs have got to expand. We're looking at teams again. Coastal Carolina.
They have been on it. They've been wrecking everything that's put in front of them this year.
And now, are they playing caliber teams that some of these Division I schools are? No, but you have to start giving these teams their fair shot. It's getting to the point where it's almost laughable because you know that you got 2 of those spots locked up. You got Alabama and Georgia. Is that really fair to the rest of the field for them not to be able to play? No, it's not. You've got to start expanding this thing. Now that I just kind of had a theory about this. I was thinking about it today, actually. It was, hey, we've got name, image, and likeness now. These players are getting endorsement deals. We've got bowls that are sponsored, by various different companies.
Bowls that are sponsored by everything under the sun.
You've got bowls sponsored by bowls. It's crazy because they want everybody to be able to participate. And I think if you're going to have that, you've got to get these kids in there. There's multitudes of money in this. And I think it's time that they expand it because these kids need to have the chance to put their craft on the line in front of on the national stage and really rake in some money. But I think this is the NCAA's answer to name, image, likeness. We know that they didn't like that. And I think that's kind of like their way to clamp down on that.
Putting a squeeze on the playoffs.
Yeah, it's their way to just block more success. But what they're doing is they're hurting the brand of it. College football is a moneymaker. Why wouldn't you want to exploit it to everybody? I mean, it makes no sense. So I just think, once again, we're now, it's even more important now to stress to get that playoff expansion.
Exactly. And it's not like you don't have the bowl games. We just talked about it. Bowl games sponsored by everything under the sun. We've got bowl games sponsored by websites nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
So you're not hurting for games. What's the harm in just picking 4 bowl games, prestigious ones, bowl games that have a history, and making 4 more of them college football playoff games?
Yeah.
Or 2 more, rather.
Yeah.
And then you have an 18 playoff. It's going to narrow it down some because, as you said, for the last couple of years, Alabama and Georgia have always been in the playoffs, and they've earned it, rightfully so. But the rest of the field should not be competing for 2 spots.
Yeah.
There needs to be more spots there, and then let the teams play it out. Let the game be what it is. A team will win, a team will lose. Somebody goes on, somebody goes home. That's what we've come to expect in sports. And then you find out who the real champion is. Maybe you have an underdog team that is ranked 8th or 7th or some low seed that nobody expects to win. Maybe they come in and take the whole thing. Like, say, they're ranked 4th and they beat the 1st seed and then go on to win the national championship. Who was it that did that, Jason?
I don't know. It was some whack team out of Columbus, Ohio.
I believe they were called the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying.
And we can talk about them like this on our show because it's our show.
Right.
Yes.
And nobody expected in the first playoff for Ohio State to win. They didn't want them there. It was just, oh, geez, it's Ohio State again. And they go on to win the whole thing and shut up the mouths of a lot of haters, and rightfully so. And I think that's what this brings. It brings so much more allure to it because, we got Coastal Carolina in there.
I was just going to say, why can't Coastal Carolina be that next Cinderella story? Maybe Coastal finds himself in ranked 7th, and then you start the playoffs, and then we see what they've got. Are they really that good, or were they a flash in the pan? Was it all smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of college football. I've been screaming about it ever since after the first playoff. I was like, look, I think we really need to
expand
to do this. But they want to, they think they're doing something smart by keeping the intensity in it and the drama and who's going to get in and when ESPN puts their board up and we're all sitting there, leaning on our chairs trying to figure out who's going to be in, if it's your team or not. And then you see it and you're just kind of like, oh, well, I thought maybe so and so would be in versus so and so. Well. Okay, it's time to solve that problem
by putting them both in.
Yeah, and let them duke it out.
Yeah. We're not saying put the entire league in the playoffs, but 8 teams. We rank 25 of the however many teams there are in Division I. So take the top 8 of those and say, all right, duke it out, see who's really the best.
Right, and I think that's how you solve a lot of problems, a lot of questions, and it just give these kids more chances to make more money and more endorsement deals and whatever it takes. I'm all for it.
And not only making more money, more endorsement deals through name, image, likeness, but bring more prestige to the schools.
Mm-hmm.
The school that nobody thought would win ends up winning.
Yeah.
That's the kind of Cinderella story that everybody loves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's our show for this week. If you're headed out to the game this weekend, please remember to take your car. We'll see you back here next week for more sports talk on CFC.